Hi, I am the co-founder of CrowdSurf,
director of events,
bass player,
video producer,
digital director,
songwriter,
manager of touring,
director of content and operations.
and you're listening to the Springboard
Music Podcast.
Say somebody's just starting out in merch. Is there in the merch world a known hierarchy, and how would you kind of know where they fell? Is that talked about?
It is. It's very specific. So on certain tours, you are said they require multiple people. So it's very clear who the leader is, because that's the one that's advancing the shows. That's the one that's booking travel. That's the ones that's communicating down to those people that are underneath that person. There was a tour with merch that there was a guy, and then there was all of us underneath him, and we were all assistants per se. But it's sort of, the pecking order gets very, very apparent based on skill set and abilities to do the job. So for someone that's getting started, if you're on a small tour where it's just one person, yes, you're the lead, you're doing all of the things. But if you're going in and we're like, hey, you're going to be on this tour and you're going to be assisting this person, it just sort of laid out that way. And it's not meant to be like, you're number one, you're number two, you're number three. It's just more so how you lay out the responsibilities, where what the pecking order is. And then really it's up to that lead and if you have a strong lead, it's helpful, but that lead sort of determines who does what on the road. Like they may want to do the settlement, and then someone else may want to do the inventory. And then like for me, I always got stuck doing the forward facing with the tours, like the comps and the marketing and setting up the stands. And yes, I could do the inventory and the counts and the settling and all of that too, but I was more of a forward facing person within the tours and within the buildings. So because you're relying on a new crew every single day to execute your vision. And so you have to be able to teach those people in a kind way to do that kind of thing, and ask them to do things that, some of these people have been doing it a long time and the business has evolved. So it's very clear how things are laid out. And if it is a kind of leader thing, typically like on the VIP side, she handled certain aspects of it, and then I handled the other aspects of it. And you just work together to work it out. But anyone new coming in is very much going to always start in either the assistant role, or they're going to start on a smaller tour where it's just that person, where they can learn the ins and out of inventory and settling. Settling, what I mean by that is just the execution of from the top to the bottom, how much is sold every night. It's just the accounting term for cleaning up the show. And then inventory is just managing what you have out there on the road.
You've mentioned training somebody how to set up certain things. So are there different volunteers at every show? And if so, how could somebody become one? Because I'm thinking that would be a great way to get experience and really kind of get your feet wet if this is what you want to do.
Yes, local is the way to go. It's the way to get in. And a lot of people, that's where we find our reps. We're like, has anybody worked with this rep locally? Like they kill it. They would be great on the road. So a lot of those people have some experience. So when you're not training them from top to bottom, most of them are paid vendors. Depending on the genre, you may have some volunteers. But most of these venues have contracted out labor to help sell. So Live Nation has a crew that comes in at their buildings and sells at all these individual places because they have hundreds of venues. But the expectation of what you're training them to do and how they're supposed to do it is different by the tour. So they know the basics of count in, count out, the general setup process. But if there's anything expectation wise from the tour, whether it's marketing materials, signage, table skirts, whatever it could be, that's where you kind of come in to do it. But yes, locally is the way to do it. And I would say that anybody that wants to get in, we're in Nashville, but every Live Nation market where there's an amphitheater, every summer they hire people to work in merch, to work in guest services, to work in hospitality in the back. It's all seasonal. So for students that want to get in, I always tell them like, hey, are you gonna be in Nashville? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, don't count yourself out, because Cleveland has a venue, and Georgia and Atlanta has a venue, and Charlotte has a venue, and like all West Coast has venues. There's a lot of ways to get in.
A couple of times we've talked about VIP versus versus merch.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a misconception that they both fall under merch. VIP typically is thought out to be more on the promoter side, or thought out to be more of an artist put together thing, but it's not. It falls under merchandise quite often. What are kind of the differences between merch and VIP?
because there's so much of it that sort of matches, it does fall over. And a lot of times it's the same person. Like there's a lot of tours where the merch rep is also the VIP rep, because for space on a bus, pay purposes, budget purposes, they kind of have to run both. But on major tours, it's very important that they're separated. And anyone that will listen to this podcast, if it's anyone at a major tour, would agree with what I'm saying. Like it really is a separate thing. There are so many different things and so many different factors that come in, because in the VIP world, there may be artist involvement. So that could be a meet and greet. That could be they come in and do a sound check party. That could be that they do a backstage tour. That could be that they do a lounge appearance. There's a lot of ways that people do sell VIP packages. So typically those come from the promoter and those VIP companies through management. Merch kind of stands alone a little bit on major tours, where they agree with the artist and what the merch line is going to look like, and then you put it out and you sell it that way. But with VIP, it's very much hands-on. There's a lot of logistics. Anytime there's an artist involved now, especially, like there's a lot of extra security levels to that. There's sometimes COVID protocols, because some artists are a little bit more cognizant of that than others. Sometimes there's testing procedures, all of those things that sort of play into this new world, if you will, that we're living in. So it's very different, but typically the artists, those two streams, merch and VIP, are huge revenue builders for artists. A lot of times, whatever they're getting in their guarantees or advances or whatever, that's covering the production. That's covering the cost of their crew to move from city to city. So their trucks, their buses, their lightings, their video, their audio, their crew costs, their hospitality budgets, all those things. So that VIP and merch revenue is a great, just another line of income that they can use to help fund their tours. On the smaller level, they really rely on that merch money, sometimes even to just get the van from point A to point B, which is a little bit of a challenge, because in some of those levels too, you're just not going to do the same amount of money merch wise or VIP, because it's a small club and you can't have 1,000 VIPs in a small club. You can, but it's absolute pure chaos, and the venue's going to cuss you out and you're going to cuss them out, and it's going to be a whole thing. So
do they take cuts from VIP stuff?
So they haven't figured out how to do that yet. It's coming, but what they do now is, it used to be where, you have a VIP, or you have a meet and greet, let's say a meet and greet. It's just understood that, like, hey, there's going to be a meet and greet before the show. Now these venues have gotten savvy, and they actually charge meet and greet fees, and they charge setup fees, and they charge for early security, and they charge for early catering, and they charge for all of these things, because the misconception is that venues care about shows. That is not true. Venues are in the business of making money, and they're about quantity, not quality. They need butts in seats, which means that drives their food and bev sales. That drives their percentage of the merch that they got, as you mentioned, which can be anywhere from 15 to 25%. Some even try to get 30%, which is absolutely asinine to take that from an artist. Quote me on that. I don't care. It's absolutely asinine. And
I completely agree.
And the agents and the promoters agree to that. And I get it, because that's sort of the standard. But there's no reason why some artist that makes $1,200 at a merch stand should have to give up 30% of that. By the way, that's after tax, because they eat taxes in most cases, and they're paying tax in every single city.
The venue wouldn't have had that merch money if it wasn't that great of an artist either, and they hadn't done their work on the front end to get those people in the building. Exactly.
And they get the money from the ticket sales, and then they get the rental fees that these artists have to pay. And the astronomical rental fees for even theaters now, like, they're all trying to recover their money from COVID, but the cost of doing a show, I think there was an article that came out recently about Lorde. She was talking about the cost of doing business on the road and how it's so challenging, because there is so many costs to it, and the venues are out for blood. They charge money for every little thing, and then they kind of halfway do it when you ask for something. And so
add that to tour buses too. All the companies sold all their buses in COVID, and so now they only have a few amount of buses, and they've racked up the price. So the artist is just losing money left and right.
And too, because a lot of the buses that they did not sell, that they didn't work on for a year and a half, this last 18 months of touring for people has been an absolute nightmare, because buses are breaking down. There's no drivers because they moved on, or they passed away, or they moved into a different driving capacity because of restrictions and those kind of things. And it's an expensive world to get into, and that's why everyone has to work so hard.
If somebody wants to support their favorite artist, if they're listening to this and they go, oh my gosh, so 30% of that sale plus tax, like none of that goes to my artist, my favorite person. And I know artists are struggling. What's a good way for them to support them through merchandise? Is that D2C? Is that on their website?
It is sometimes D2C, but in some cases, the website may be run by the merch company, so they're taking a cut. Shopify takes their cuts. That's the back end that everybody uses these days. Some use ShipStation. There's a lot of these companies that help sort of have these interfaces or back ends that help companies monitor their inventory much better. But it is a little bit, really the reality is yes, the companies do, or these buildings, I should say, not the companies, they do take their 20, 25, 30% in some cases, but that really is the way that artists make money. So I say if you're going to a show, you can buy online, but get something at the show too. It doesn't necessarily have to be a t-shirt. There's always those little items, whether it's a beanie, a hat, a koozie, some kind of something like that goes a long way. And those kind of sales really rack up. And especially if you've been given a ticket to a show, go buy something, because, there's this understood thing that if they paper or give away a bunch of tickets to a show, then you're not going to have as many people buy. And there is a lot of science and statistical data to back that up. So if you're there for free, maybe go spend something on something other than just a beer, because the artist most of the time doesn't see that. I mean, there are some artists that have a lot of power that get into the food and bev cuts, just like the venues take out of the merch, but it's very rare. So that's the way to do it, is really do support them on the live side. Yes, but you're spending $10 on a beer. What's the difference in spending $20 on a something? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you drink 2 beers at any venue these days, it's 10, 15, $20. So it's not any higher. That's really that's my message. And when I'm at a merch table and someone says that, it's so high to me, and they're literally holding 2 doubles, and I have to be like, what did you just spend on that?
Such a great point. I know in the music industry, we're given comp tickets all the time. And I'll be honest, it does not cross my mind to go buy something for my friend. That's the artist. I don't think about it. I think, oh, I'll get that for free. But like, I may be their biggest fan. I should buy something.
It's a revenue stream. And the artists that really understand that, and the teams that really do that, really do well with it. I mean, it can be very lucrative. It's the ones that go, we want it, but we don't want to make space for it, or we don't want to put a lot of emphasis in it because we need to put more emphasis on a production, which totally makes sense. You got to make your show good. But that also costs money when merch brings in money.
SoundScan.
Yes.
This is a way merch has evolved over the last couple of years. I would love for you to explain how SoundScan, what it is and how it fits into merch.
Yes. So for SoundScan, it is the way that MediaBase and all of the metrics are tracked to see how much an artist is selling. So in terms of products, so CDs, if you're selling digital downloads, if you're selling vinyls on the road, those types of things. So SoundScan, the way that it's reported is essentially it's a back end thing within some of the settlement systems, if you will, which most people use at venue these days, but some are still settling on spreadsheets. But essentially it kicks it to SoundScan. It says you sold this many units, and then that tracks so that you get the scans to raise up. This is really important in a lot of industries, especially like CCM uses this as a great marketing tool. Country uses this as a great marketing tool. Like, you need to be able to say like, hey, we debuted number 1, or we debuted in the top 5. And essentially what that's just saying is that's how much you sold. And so it's not as prevalent with t-shirts and tchotchke items and those. It really does play into the music, the vinyls, those kind of things, just to track, because it's just it's a great resource also to use for research, which a lot of things is based on research and analytics of like, okay, well, when we go into this market, we know this many people have bought this music, so this is what we can expect to sell in tickets. So it gives you a lot of great data on the back end, but so does a lot of the other systems that are being used. But that's the the cut and dry version of how SoundScan works.
I think that's so helpful, especially for new artists, as they go to release music, release albums, release a project. SoundScan is so important, and it's so important to release shows around a album release so that that merch is scanned in for the media-based numbers and for your research. So I'm really glad you touched on that. At what point in somebody's artist career do you believe they should start considering merch? Is that something they should consider right off the bat? Because like you said, it brings in money.
It's so tough. And this, I mean, you could ask 50 different people and probably get 50 different answers on this. And it's a really challenging thing because I struggle with this. But I use the analogy that this brilliant person said one time, and it was to a different question. The question was, when do I need a manager? It was a student asking a guest speaker that I had, and she said, when there's something to manage. And what she meant by that is the guy was like, I've got this, that, and the other. And she's like, yeah, but can't you do that? You know, it was kind of the point was, can't you take care of that? When there's a lot to go on, when you can't answer calls, when you can't answer emails, when you can't do that, you need a manager. So to relate that to merch, I say, if you're not at a place where you can carry it, then do not have it. And what I mean by that is, if you can't carry a box or a suitcase or something with you at these shows, and have room for it and truly have the chance to sell it, then don't have it. If you are a act signed to a record label, you have got to make sure that there's space for it. If you're a growing independent artist and maybe you're not on a record label, but you've got, let's say 30 shows at, you know, and you're selling 800-900 tickets in a market, whether it's an A, B, C, or D market, which is essentially just based on population and market size. But, you know, you got to have it there. That's the way that you expose yourself. It's also the way that you draw fans in from the social aspect, whether you do email blasts, which I know people think that email blasts are archaic. They're never going away. It's the easiest way to do things. Because all of these platforms, we see what happens. Like, you get mad and then one platform starts to die, and then this one starts to die, and then this one loses money. And then there's something new that someone else like has to learn. And so I'm sorry, but you're not always going to have that. And everyone knows how to use email.
I would encourage every single person listening to look through their email and see what mass emails you've opened recently, because I'm sure you've opened a Nike email. I myself opened the Hattie Jane seasonal flavor email, your Crumble Cookie Weekly email.
Crumble Cookie Weeklies, yes.
Trust me, you are opening your e-blasts.
And they know a lot about you because you open those e-blasts, just so you know. The companies can tell a lot about you, like what your trends are when you open your emails during, like, what's the best time to send these kind of things. But for new artists, it's a great way to just grow your list. It's the same way when you go into any store at the mall, they want you to put your email in for their receipt. It's not because they want you to really have the receipt for a return. They want your data. And it's the legal way to get it. So for new artists, if you're sitting here going, hey, I could, you know, maybe give a sticker to everyone that signs up for our email blast. Well, if I get 500 signatures in this market, the next time we come around, I can blast to those 500 people, and I might get a 30 to 40% return rate, or maybe higher on already built-in people that might buy tickets. So it's a great way to do that. And just drawing interest, and, you know, it's all about buzz, and we're all little bees. And so one thing gets distracting, and then we move over here. Like, our attention spans are so short now, especially with TikTok and all of those types of things. So this is the way that you can always go back to that, identifying that base.
How important is it to have a consistent merch team versus a volunteer team?
It's really, really important. In fact, if you have someone consistently working on your stuff, so they're looking at it from all eyes all the time. So in my day-to-day, I'm looking at how much product does that person have on the road? How much are we expecting them to sell? How many tickets have they sold? You know, if you're just kind of halfway doing it, or no one's really watching it, you're not going to have the product to sell, because inevitably you'll run out. Someone won't be managing it. It'll get left somewhere by accident. It happens, human nature. You know, you're loading stuff up, you just forget things. So, you know, when you use volunteers, you're asking people to give up their time for free that most people get paid for. And so it's a really nice like way to get people in. But when they're volunteers, the expectation is they don't perform as highly, and your sales can drop nearly 20 to 30% with volunteers, as opposed to having someone that is used to it professionally selling. I mean, it's a huge markup. And kind of to that point, like there's two different ways that are sold at the venues. Like some venues, they take their percentage, but it's artist sales. So you have to have someone that you are paying to sell, versus the venue where you turn it over to them and they have a whole crew. Well, inevitably, if you sell venue, if that's the option, you're going to gross more and sell more product because they have more bodies, because they can afford it, because it's coming out of their cut, not you paying the venue cut plus having to hire sellers and vendors and those types of things. So
wow.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And a lot of venues, shame on y'all, but they're very quick to go, well, we're going to take 20%. We don't even want to give you a table, or we won't even give you a light where people can see your stuff. Like, and just asking for the basic things like an outlet, or do you have a Wi-Fi I can get on? No, you got to be on the open Wi-Fi. It's like, it's 2023, almost, well, what is it's 2023 basically. Like, come on.
How do you navigate those situations? Do you advance them? Do you say, okay, we need an outlet, we need a light, we need this? I'm sure you do, but say you get there and that's not the case. What is the best way? Because you need the relationship to some extent with that venue. What do you do?
Yeah, so that is a very great question. And it's one that you definitely struggle with, because yes, in some cases you're going to see those people again. And at major venues, you typically don't have a problem. And sometimes those people that run the venues may have multiple venues, so you do see them a lot. Clubs and those types of smaller venues, those people are pretty secular to that specific venue. I always try to lead with kindness, first of all, and say like, hey, I'm not trying to be a burden, but you are getting a percentage. And by the way, you're going to make money because we're here tonight. If we weren't here and this venue was dark, so I try to take that approach with like kindly slap them in the face and be like, please help me, in a very nice way. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. I mean, and depending on what the scenario is, I mean, sometimes it's about arguing over percentage. It can go all the way up to the agent in some cases. And sometimes the agents do have to step in, because on these small shows, they're being booked with the agent in the venue, and there's not really a mediate person. And you're just trying to figure out how to get through the show and effectively use it. Sometimes you're just SOL. I mean, I had a friend recently that just advanced everything. The promoter stopped texting middle of the day, and they were sitting in an outside with no light. And so, and now that it's dark at 4:00 or whatever, you just, sometimes you get backwards. And those are the cases where you go back and go, so you want 20% for this? How about 5 or 10? Like, you negotiate on the spot. And that's a really hard thing to do for newer people, more experienced people. I mean, I would just be like, so what percentage are you really think you're going to get tonight? Because I'm going to negotiate right there on the spot. And sometimes the road reps will call me and I'll say, put me on the phone, because they can't win the battle. And they'll be like, who are you? And I'm like, I'm your best person right now that you can talk to, because the next person you'll talk to is probably not going to be as friendly as I am. But you didn't do this. You promised this. You didn't do this. Help us out, kind of thing.
Say somebody's new on the road and they find themselves in that situation. Who do they go to? Let's say they're by themselves.
Yeah. In some cases, we try to, especially if they have a merch company like us, we try to step in and stay out of the tour managers and the tours way, as we call it, since it's kind of secondary. But there are some cases where, yeah, they've got to go directly to the tour manager, who then has to run up the flagpole, so to speak. And those situations happen few and far between nowadays, because there's just sort of that expectation. And the reason it doesn't happen nearly as often as it used to is because now managers, or tour managers really, are now starting to advance that with the entirety of the show, as opposed to being like, here's the merch contact, good luck. Most of them that get it realize like they're in charge, a tour manager is in charge of every little thing. And whether they want to be or not, and most don't like merch. My first tour manager couldn't stand it. Like, sorry. I mean, you're getting paid to deal, like, this is your job. So that helps when it comes from the very beginning and somewhat some of the top, because unfortunately, sometimes merch and VIP are very much looked at like afterthoughts.
Which is such a
And
bummer
they're
when it's the
yeah.
moneymaker.
I was about to say, that's what I was about to say. Yeah, it's the bummer because that's what brings in the money.
I don't understand why that is, but I hope it changes quickly. Even just for the fans and for the artists, it's everybody needs everybody to help everybody at the end of the day.
Right.
It's the circle of life for the industry. If somebody's listening to this episode and they say, "Oh my gosh, I make my own merch for shows. I didn't even know this was a job to be on a merch team for an artist." And, we've talked about the touring side, but then Alex, you now don't tour, but you're also involved with artist merch. What are some skills that in general, because, there's VIP, there's touring, there's not touring, but in general, if somebody wants to be involved in merch, what are some skills that that person would need to have?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things. For one, and I'm not good at this. I really don't like Photoshop. I can do a lot of damage in Canva but just having those basic design skills and understanding product. So, there are product manager positions, and essentially what your job is to build line sheets and to outsource products. So like knowing who the vendors are and just being knowledgeable of the general fund of things is helpful. I say a lot of people are really good at this, better than I, because you know how many people are on Etsy now and Pinterest and like literally doing their little design boards for whatever it is, whether it's a wedding or a trip or, summer fashion, whatever. So, I always say that if you have the go to do it, you can learn anything that you want. And just really be prepared for that eventual failure, because we all have them. I mean, anyone that rides high, that says, "Oh, I've got it all figured out," my immediate response to them is just wait until God laughs at you, because you do not have it figured out. And we all have some sort of, failure that's going to come. And you know what? You deal with it and you move on. So, but for merch and things, I think that it is a lot of learning on as you go and understanding like blanks and how to source blanks. And by that, I mean, are you using a Gildan 5000? Are you using a Comfort Colors brand? Which one do you like better? What does the artist like? Comfort Colors and LA Apparel are great brands. They look more wearable, or streetwear as we call them, but they're also really freaking expensive and they have a long turnaround time. So knowing, just being aware of like clothing brands and materials and just products, the best people that do merch are sometimes the ones that have been the biggest fans, because they buy at shows. They've looked at the merch stands. They know artists inside and out. And I think that is a skill that sometimes people think they know, but it's bigger than just t-shirts. There's a lot of marketing behind it. There's a lot of branding behind it. And I would say all of my jobs I got because I had a marketing degree. It wasn't because, oh, he can do merch. It was because, oh, he understands the bigger picture. And I think that is more powerful than understanding every single X and O of the merch business.
If somebody heard that list of kind of qualifications and skills and they say, "Yep, that's me. Let's go. Sign me up."
Yeah.
But I'm in high school, but I'm in college. Where can they start getting experience or skills? And I know you had some really, really amazing advice, which is learn the clothing brands, learn where you can get samples of clothes and the different thread counts, the different feel, the different material combinations, all of that. And then beyond that, right? Certain products beyond clothes. But then, how do they build a resume?
I think there are 3 ways to really build a resume. I always say intern as much as you can. So I would say, even for merchandise purposes, it's really important to intern at a label, because you can understand, because labels work very differently and they also look at products very differently. Intern at a management company, intern at a merch company. There are merch internships out there. They are a little bit harder to find. And there are sometimes, like, instead of having multiple a semester, like that company may only have 1 or maybe 2. But it's a great way to get in and just sort of be in the room, because, I went to school for this and I have a music business and marketing degree. And yes, I know the X's and O's and the theories. I mean, those are great. They're very important, but I learned a lot by being in the room and using the 2 ears that I have. Now I'm actually in meetings and I have to speak, but I used to get to go to meetings and not say anything, and I learned so much more. But now I actually have to talk, which it's different as it goes, as they say. But I think that learning those different aspects is a great way to intern. I really hate the term networking, so I don't really talk about that. I mean, a lot of people will say, oh, you've got to network, you've got to network. No, you've got to build relationships. And this is where I think the difference is. Many of the people that I'm still closest with to this day, I met as soon as I came to Nashville, and we are still friends. And I did that by building relationships, because the term networking is very icky. And the reality, and this may sound pretty brutal, but the reality is that is a transactional relationship. I want something from you. You want something from me. I know when someone walks up to me in class or at a venue and they're asking me questions, they want something from me. Same way I used to want stuff from people. But my relationships have carried me a lot further. They've carried me so much further than any networking or any theory that I learned in class, or anything that I've actually done, because the people that I work with and the people that I know, I've known for 10 years and 12 years. And we've walked through fire together. We don't talk every day, but the relationship isn't transactional. The relationship is truly built in trust and caring and community and strong knowledge that you're there for each other. And I think that is what I preach to so many students is, we all know you want something. We get it. Like, everyone has a goal, but don't be so icky about that goal. Like, build the relationships. You don't have to be the last one at the party. You don't have to be the first one. You don't want to be the one that's known to be everywhere all the time. My strategy has always been, get seen a lot less. And it doesn't have to be on social media. That really will get you in a lot of trouble when you're new, is putting everything on social media, because it's like, well, this person's always somewhere. There are so many buildings and so many things that I went to that never show up online because I don't want to. And I kind of like the mystery of it. But the reason I bring that up is because when I do go, I make sure that it's very intentional, and I make sure that the people that I'm talking to don't just think that we just had this like offhanded conversation that really won't amount to anything. Like, you have my attention, like I have your attention, and it's really, really important to do that.
People can feel when you attend something just to post that you attended.
Mm-hmm. It's the ones that always have their phone, and like, you're like, you've missed the whole thing. You've missed the whole thing. And everybody knows you're just here to be seen. And typically those people, yes, they may have a leg up and they may get something earlier than the one that's having to work a little harder or that didn't do that, but they don't last as long. They don't have the longevity, because eventually they make a miscue or they do something that make the wrong person upset with them. It goes a long way. And I just think that relationships are more important than connecting. Because there's a lot of people that and you're like, hey, cool, good to see you. Like, we know each other, but we're not friends, but we're music industry friends, as I like to say. Then there's the other ones that like you stop and talk to for like 5-10 minutes at a party, or when you see them in the grocery store in Nashville or wherever it may be, or you all do Zooms together, like especially now, or when people come into town. Relationships are going to take you a lot further than just a 2-minute networking thing because you were in the right place at the right time. And that is part of it. It is right place, right time. I've been lucky. I can't say that I haven't, and I've had people that have helped me along the way, because everyone has to have some help. And I'm thankful to those people, but I've also had to then do the work. So that's where the disconnect. Sometimes it's like, oh, well, I know this person, like, it's great. And then they get in the job, kind of like we were talking about earlier. Then you have to do the work. Like, you can get in a lot of doors, but then you got to be ready to roll up your sleeves and do it. And I think that sometimes that ickiness of the networking creates that, ooh, I'm just here for the fun. Like, I'm here for the party. I'm here for the glory. But guess what? The music business is hard. And I mean, yes, there's a lot of glitz and glamour, but there's a lot of in the back of venues, lots of toting boxes, lots of pushing carts, and a lot of the blood, sweat, and tears, if you want to use that phrase, that goes into it. And it's hard. It can be hard.
I've experienced it all, and I was just in radio.
I mean, they're vicious. I mean, they're vicious in radio. Like some of the radio people, they may punch you in the face before anybody else would, like, because it's all a game. And that's one of those, like, relationships, like, go a long way too. I think it goes a long way on the road, because no matter what job you're doing on the road, or really anything across the board, like, relationships just truly matter, because people want to work with people that are fun, and that not only are they fun, but they know that they can depend on them. They know that they're not going to come to work an hour late all the time, or leave early, or be here or be that. Like, people want to work with that they know, like, I've got their back, and you've got mine.
I want to congratulate you, Alex, because I saw that you got promoted recently.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
Thank
Maybe
you.
like you just like forgot to update the LinkedIn, and that's cool. But in my world, you just got promoted. And
Thank you.
I want to know what your job now consists of. And I want to hear what a common misconception is of your job. We're about to go to Thanksgiving. Yeah. What is something somebody's going to say to you over the dinner table? And you're like, actually, not at all what I do.
So my job now is I am a manager of touring at Future Shirts. And so I'm a part of the touring department, and I have we have our full client roster, but I have a certain number of clients that I work with on a daily basis. Sometimes I just barely touch some every day, but then there's sometimes that I touch everybody every day. And what I mean by that is looking at their reports, sending an email to their managers, looking at product lines, planning their tours, planning budgets for them, so that we can figure out what the product line is going to look like, and how much do we think they're going to sell, and how much space do we need. Or maybe it's a meeting about, hey, this didn't do nearly as well. Would we be up for trying something like this? Like, those are sometimes hard conversations that we have. But my day in and day out is I just go up that roster and see who's got something going on, and what I need to do them to help them achieve a goal, and what I can do to service them better. And I always try to stay, it drives some of my coworkers nuts, because I always try to say, like, 3 weeks ahead, which doesn't always work in the music business, but it's something that I always strive to be, because I like to beat the problems to the problems and see them coming. So that's really what it is. It's a lot of logistics. It's a lot of scheduling. And it's a lot of communication and conversation, and so it's been really fun to move into this role, and I'm excited for what's to come, and it's interesting to try to explain to people, to the second part of your question, because when I first started, like, a group of my family members, there used to be like 40 of us that would get together at Thanksgiving, and all they knew is, like, hey, he works with famous people, and which was always humorous to me, because most of the time you're not even talking to the famous people. Actually 90% of the time you're not talking to the famous people, and
okay,
nor do I care.
That is something that I'm sure people want to know, is how often do you interact? There's your answer, folks.
Yes, there's the
rarely.
Answer. Very rare, very rare. I mean, there are certain clients that I'm a little bit more in tune with and have historically throughout all my 10-year career. It's crazy to say that now, but it's been 10 years. But there's very little interaction in some cases. There are some that are way more in tune. Now, most of those people know who I am, but they're not interacting with me on a daily basis. But they know, like, when they say something to their manager, the manager may say, I'm going to go talk to Alex about this. And that's fine. Like, I try to go see them at shows and say hello here and there, but it's very rare that you're involved with the people all of the time. And so I think that it's one of those misconceptions that you're just hanging out all the time, and you're just hanging out with the famous folks and all of that kind of stuff, but you don't really. And so the way I've always explained it to my family when you're sitting around the table is, when I was in VIP, I explained that. When I was in merch, I kind of talked about it, but I also talk about it in the scope of, it isn't just T-shirts, it's branding, it's marketing, and it's all this. And then I always like to say, like, I'm the person that makes your favorite artist money, and I try to make them a lot of money. And so, but not just money, but make sure that they're achieving what it is that their goals are, because that's ultimately what we're there to do. We're there to service the client in the best way that we possibly can, and make sure that they understand what the outcomes are, give them realistic expectations so that they're not confused, while also providing a service and trying to have fun, because we are a part of every element is a part of the entertainment industry is there to tell a story. We're there to tell stories. We're there to create experiences, whatever that experience it is, whether it's to let someone come to a show and forget about the horrible day they had for 2 hours, or whether they're going through a really, really hard time and that song really changes their life. We're there to enhance the experience in some way, form, or fashion. And that's what I'm there to do. And that's what we try to do. And that's what we strive to do is make it easy, make it fun, but also create those experiences that really matter.
To me, when I hear you talk about that, it sounds like you're living the dream. I know there's blood, sweat, and tears, but when I hear you talk about making experiences and connecting fans and helping artists create a livelihood and combine all of that, it sounds incredible. Would you believe that? Would you say that you're living the dream?
That is such a unique question. And I love that question because I don't really think about it until someone says it to me. But I would say that I do live the dream because I have one of the best jobs in the world. I don't wear a suit and tie to work. I wear whatever I want. I do what I need to do. I work hard, and I get to see people really affected, whether it be negative or positive. And so I think to flip that question though a little bit is the dream is what you make it. The dream is what you make it. And, we're so pressured in society to run up a ladder and think that we're going to make all this money and be this important person overnight. And it just doesn't work that way. And I think dreaming is about living in your circumstances that you're in, because the truth is we're not really in control. Like every little period of time that I've already talked about today has already been scoped out for me, and it's written, and I've just lived it as it's come. And so I do say that I'm living the dream. I think that whether this dream changes, who knows? Like right now, I'm really happy, but dreams are meant to happen. And when you achieve them or think you've achieved them, then maybe you dream a little harder and you dream up something else that's, really fun.
I completely agree. That has been my story the last month and a half. So I agree. I think my mantra these days has been dream big, chase it, achieve it, dream big again. And so I think that that's an incredible answer, and I love your spin on it. Thank you so much for your time.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Springboard Music Podcast. If you like what you're hearing, feel free to follow us on TikTok or Instagram at Springboard Music. And if there's anyone that you would like to hear us interview or a position you're particularly interested in the music industry, we're not above gearing our content towards what you want. After all, this is for you.